Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Tonight I wanted to bring you guys along and show you what I found on this BMW. It was towed in over the weekend. The customer told me that it had been having some error lights coming on the dash or the iDrive and it would start to run rough. I think it's a drive malfunction error that he said it would keep coming up. So this morning I got in it, drove it just from the front to the back inside to start scanning it. I didn't notice anything crazy right off the bat. But once I scanned it, I cleared all the codes. It had multiple Misfire codes, so I saved that and then cleared it and started it and let it run. After I got it running, just a few seconds after that, it started misfiring. So from then, just the typical norm, I wanted to go ahead and monitor all the ignition coils because it felt as if it might just possibly be a ignition coil issue. So just right off the bat, since there's only four, I tapped into all four as I normally do with these BMW coils. And you can monitor the primary side pretty good in detail and start to pick up if any of the coils are basically failing or dropping out. So that's where I started. I'm going to bring you guys along, show you what I found so far and what I think it might need. Okay, so I'll get it started, get you a shot of what it does. At the same time, I am scoping the ignition coils. And so it's idling pretty normal. Oh, there you go. Pretty quick misfire. I do have the, again, I've got the scope running and we'll take a look at that. Okay, so here's the capture. Again, this is all coils being monitored. I've got them in order. So channel blue is coil 1, red is 2, green is 3, and then the yellow gold is cylinder number 4. So if we take a look here in the beginning, let's see what we got. So we'll start with blue to blue. So that's cylinder 1 back to cylinder 1. We are firing. Now, keep in mind, and I've mentioned this before when I show some of these ignition traces, my sample rate and stuff when I do this, I put a large amount of time when I monitor most of every capture. So I'm on 5 seconds, but my sample rate is very low. And so it makes it look like the coils don't, the firing line is not there or whatnot, but that's not where we need to be looking, at least right now, because what we are looking for is coils just basically dropping out completely where we're not igniting, because we can physically feel and hear a dead hole or dead holes. So in order to see a dead hole here in the waveform, one of these or two of these would look drastically different from the other, mainly in this area of, let's call it time, this distance right here. One would have to look different from all the rest in order for us to find a offending cylinder. The other area that I look at on these coils is this bottom range after the firing line. When it dies off, you want to see oscillations, which actually we do have on all of them. When they start to fail, they'll kind of have a curved ramp right here in the ending area. So right now, this is beginning of the capture. All coils are firing. None of them are dropping out. So I do that to look for how they appear in the known good working state. And then here at this point is where we started misfiring. And it actually did go also into multi-strike. These will do multi-strike at idle, basically cold start idle. So that's what we're seeing it do. But we also did start misfiring. And just to be 100% sure, we'll get you more towards the end here where we know 100% we were in a misfiring state. But again, we didn't drop out as far as All colors are still there. Not one has disappeared from the screen. And just an example, in this, you're not going to look at the multi-strike. You're going to look at the last one that creates that space. Let's call it that area. Again, don't nitpick the high firing line that we see and don't see. This is just a scope sampling rate thing. You wouldn't have this distance in time or firing spark line, whatever you want to call it, if the rest weren't acting basically kind of properly. So none of them are disappearing. We are having burn time. They are operating. They're actually in multi-strike, like we said, and this is towards the end of the capture where we know it was misfiring. This is where it started to get interesting for me because I was expecting your everyday run-of-the-mill BMW with a misfiring issue due to failing coils. And that is not what we're seeing, not what we have. And that's part of why I wanted to bring you guys along. So, as I keep scrolling, nothing crazy. This is, looks like towards the end where we shut off. Alright, so after looking at all the coils, let's go ahead and get you a shot of the trouble code. Okay, so identified the vehicle. I'm going to go straight to the DME just to show you guys exactly what's going on as far as trouble codes. So physically, symptom-wise, we know we are misfiring after a few seconds of running. And this is what keeps returning. Every single time you clear it, run it, it starts misfiring, codes come up. These are all the same codes. Now, again, I've been testing this afternoon, and this is the only ones that reappear. Obviously, misfire, fuel injection cut out, several cylinders. We've got one that says fuel injection for number 1 was cut because misfiring in number 1. We've got number 3 that was cut because number 3 was misfiring. So we've got basically basically like a PO300, several cylinders. And the big kind of clue here, it's telling us cylinders 1 and 3. And so it's cutting the injectors for those as it's telling us here. So I will clear them here before we continue doing our testing. Okay, we'll key it off and we'll move on. Now I do want to mention that I'm kind of breaking one of my main rules. We've got a misfiring vehicle, and anytime I get that or that you guys get that, you should do a relative compression. The reason why I didn't start going off in that direction as I normally always would is because the way that it felt when I drove it from the front of the shop to the back, and the way that it feels when it starts, runs, and idles okay, up until the point that it's like a light switch and it just starts cutting out misfiring. And it's the same codes all the time. Meaning that I think there's something else electronic going on besides a physical compression or drivability issue. We're not saying that that couldn't be possible, but just the way that it felt or that it's acting or how it cuts out continuously like clockwork, I started chasing basically electrical stuff. I started with the coils, and then I moved on to just monitoring the injectors. I'm wondering if there's something that's drawing too much amperage or doesn't look right electrically, and it wigs out the computer and it just cuts it out, and it's the same code, same cylinders, same thing, same amount of time, and that's why I went the way that I did. So I want to get you a shot of the injector testing that I did, but I think just before doing that, so that I can do it on camera, which I yet still have not done up to this point. Let's go ahead and do a relative compression just to see what that looks like. Okay, so I've got all the injectors unplugged. Scope is running. I still got all the coils. I just added the amp clamp and see what that looks like. Alright, so it didn't sound too crazy. And looks like all cylinders seem to be, again, relatively close to each other, including cylinders 1 and 3. So we've got 1, 3, 4, 2, 1, 3. So 1, 3 there. 1, 3. The ones that were, throwing the misfiring codes all seem to appear similar to all the others. So again, kind of confirms the gut feeling I was sort of having. It doesn't sound too much like a mechanical issue. Now, yeah, that one looked a little low. That is cylinder 3, but all the other ones seem to come up normal. So we'll move on from there onto looking at the injectors. Okay, so what I am doing is monitoring injector 1, 2, and 3 as far as voltage, both the power feed and the control side of those 3 injectors all at the same time. And I am on injector 1 and 2 for amperage reading. Basically using number 2 as a quote-unquote baseline, as possibly not having any issues with it since we keep having codes for 1 and 3. I want to see if injector waveforms for numbers 1 and 3 look anything oddball or weird or different from injector number 2. So all injectors are plugged back in, and we'll get you running. Alright, we'll take a look at that. Now, one thing to point out, this is the first time, again, that I did a relative compression, and I usually always, on these, unplug the injectors. I just rescanned it after getting the... actually, let me stop that, because I haven't. There we go. Okay, so after stopping it off of that, I scanned real quick the DME, and these first 4 are some that I've not seen yet before, and I was afraid of creating new problems. But this bottom section is the same normal codes that always comes back. Now what looks like happened when I unplugged all the injectors, this is basically telling you these are basically unplugged injector codes, because the way it's describing it, classic BMW, the wording, it says rising current too slow. Instead of telling you basically circuit open or whatnot, they're just telling you that there was not any current flow because they were unplugged. Also, another interesting one to note, rail pressure signal fixed because we didn't have any injection occur in any of the injectors. So it's pretty cool or neat or crazy that it's that finicky that it's going to tattletale of no rail pressure change. So that these are some new ones that I haven't run into, but we created those. And here is the normal ones. It's always 1 and 3 again. And typically, BMW or most other makes will shut off injectors if it sees that the cylinder is not combusting properly, fully, or at all. And it will cut the injector to save the cat. So again, fuel injection is cut out, cylinder 1. Combustion misfire, cylinder 1 detected. So basically it's telling you that it didn't see it combust, so then it cuts the injector. And it saw that supposedly for cylinders 1 and 3, and it performed the same action. Okay, so after concluding that the computer was not being basically shocked or confused due to some high amperage voltage issue, I decided to take a step back and basically start looking at what the computer would look at in order to try to determine why it's coming up with the trouble codes that it does and why it goes into the shut down the 2 injector mode. So the waveform that I've got here, and this is actually just a still picture of it because I did not save it, but what I decided to look at here in the red trace was the exhaust pulses during its idling condition. And the blue trace is my ignition number 1, green is the intake. But I wanted to look at the exhaust trace because every time the engine fires, it's going to create a high pressure in the cylinder, and then all that pressure is going to come out of the exhaust valve through the piping and down out into atmosphere, where I am basically taking this measurement. And so each cylinder's combustion and the pressure in all the cylinders should be the same, because all the combustion process from cylinder to cylinder should happen equally, basically the same as each other. And so you're wanting to look at all those pulses, and all those should be the same. If there is any difference in the pulses, then something is not right in one cylinder compared to the other, and it's going to be due to or related with the pressure that's in the cylinder that we are seeing come out that is different than the others. And so what you see here, this is where we start, run, and idle. And here, if you look at the red trace, it gets larger, and then the blue kind of starts acting a little bit different also. That's the turning point of when the computer shut down the injectors, and we have clear and obvious misfires here at this point. So then I wanted to look at, during this, what we feel to be an okay idle, I wanted to see what the exhaust pulses looked like. And so here is a zoomed in capture of just before that point where the computer is controlling injectors, and then this point is after it's shut down the injectors. As you can tell, the red gets all big and crazy. But if you look at some of these points that I highlighted, again, we're wanting to see all these pulses happen equally the same and reach same levels. But here is one where it's not as deep. Here's another one, and here's another one. And throughout the capture, there's random ones like that. But so what that there tells us, physically, we are measuring and seeing that the pressure in the cylinders at that point. Now that's actually going to be cylinder number 1. That's cylinder number 3 as far as the sinking in the exhaust pulse. But those lower than or not as big in levels compared to the others that reach down further, that is telling us that combustion wasn't fully burnt properly, and compared to the others, we are having basically issues there in the cylinders. One thing to note, the pulses are present, so it's not a complete dead misfire, no combustion occurred. Combustion occurred because we see pulses. They're just not as strong in the levels compared to the others. And even within itself, if you look here in this two sections here, all those pulses look to be about the same and even. It's just randomly the power pulses coming out are not as strong as other times or as the other cylinders. So that's telling us we are having complete in combustion. And then the next thing that I wanted to look at to try to think and see through the computer's eyes was the crankshaft sensor signal, which I have down here in the red. Blue is my ignition sync. And what we have here in the black channel is a generated math channel that is created off of the crankshaft sensor signal. Now, the reason why I wanted to look at this and create this is because the computer is going to monitor the crankshaft sensor signal for speed fluctuations. Anytime, again, when we have combustion and that high pressure is created and pushes down on the piston, it's going to accelerate the crankshaft and it's going to speed it up. It'll then slow down when it gets to the next combustion cylinder, and then it'll speed up when that one ignites, and so on and so forth. So all of them, if they're firing equally, should all combust and speed up the crankshaft the same rate of speed and amount of force. So that is what I wanted to monitor. And again, here was the start, run, idle, and then here towards the end where the blue gets a little bit funky. And even there, you can tell with the math channel, that is that turning point where the computer shut down the injectors. So I wanted to monitor up to that point where, again, where we think we're running okay, and I wanted to see what the crankshaft speed was doing. And so what we have here is a zoomed in point of where it was idling kind of okay, nothing too crazy. And so again, the blue is ignition sync 1, and so on and so forth. So in between those two ignition points, you're going to have firing events for the other cylinders. The black trace is the math channel. Anytime the direction goes up, that means the crankshaft speed sped up. When it starts to come down, that naturally is a slow down point of the crankshaft speed. So if you look at this point, let's see, cylinder 1 fires and then it speeds up the crankshaft and then it'll slow down. Number 3 fires, it speeds up, then it'll slow down. Number 4 fires and it speeds up, slows down. Number 2 fires and it speeds up. So we are watching the crankshaft speed be continuously spun by each ignition event. Now, keep in mind, you have to kind of use your imagination when you build this math channel, because we do have these dropouts, and that is because we're monitoring the actual, basically, teeth of the crankshaft trigger wheel, and we do have segment that is missing, and so that is a dropout point. But you kind of just have to connect the dots and go across to get your build your imaginary line there. So basically that's what the yellow is. I kind of just drew what that pattern is, and you can tell there are points where it comes down and then goes up, down, up, down, up. Now you could tell cylinder 4, because it's going to be 1, 3, 4, 2. Number 4 always seems to hit pretty strong and hard, and it speeds it up a lot more. Now, number 1 and 3 are still igniting and speeding up the crankshaft, but I'll get you a shot of where you can tell a whole lot better where it's starting to not contribute for cylinder 1 and 3. And so the way that you want to do this is, and It doesn't work on all cars. A lot of it depends on the pressure sensor and so on and so forth. But I have found that at least on these Europeans, you can pick up that a good waveform. Now, obviously, we're working with high pressure injectors. There is no Schrader valve. If you're aware, you are able to test the fuel pressure on regular port injectors and sync it with a fuel injector, and you can watch the fuel pressure drop each time an injector opens, and you can see if the injectors are basically dropping an equal amount of fuel per injector. That's one way to diagnose with the scope. And so with that concept, we're basically doing the same thing, but we tap into the fuel pressure sensor, the rail sensor signal that goes to the DME, and that's going to give us the pressure reading. But with the scope, we could zoom in enough to watch the pulses occurring. And then all you do is sync it to an injector, and you can sync your firing order to the injector openings, which will show you the fuel drop. Now, again, you only need the signal and one injector. I've got 4 just so that I can show you and explain the drops and the characteristics of the injectors all at one time. But you don't have to do it. You can do it one at a time if you want to get into further detail. But that's the setup. I'll go ahead and run the car till it misfires, and we'll analyze the waveform. Okay, so let's take a look at that waveform. We'll zoom in. Red is our fuel pressure, and the rest of the colors are going to be all our injectors. Injector number 1 is color blue, and so we'll kind of go from there. And so just quickly to point out, we've got 1, 3, 4, 2, back to 1. We'll mark that out. And hopefully we could see something going on. We'll add 1, 2, 4. And let's take a look here. We'll clean this up. This way, add a little more. Okay, so we've got 1, 3, 4, 2. So I can already see a difference. Now, in the red, anytime we drop the signal, we drop pressure. So, and here's our sync for firing of number 1. When we fire, the pressure drops. It'll stay kind of steady, build back up. Next one fires, cylinder 3, pressure drops. Kind of hold steady till the next one. This is going to be number 4. Look at that drop from when it fired. And then the last one, number 2, look at that drop from when it fired. So right here, clear as day, number 1 and number 3 are way different than 4 and 2 as far as the fuel pressure characteristic that we just captured. Now we're watching all the injectors that are supposed to be firing the same amount, which would cause the same pressure drop, which would cause all cylinders to run the same because of the same amount of fueling. We're getting 2 that are misfiring, 1 and 3. We are now seeing 1 and 3 having different fuel spray pattern pressure drop. That right there is our misfiring issue. That is our cause. 100%. And it's almost like a reoccurring characteristic of the less drops. You can tell from here to here it's kind of flat, and here it's a drop, here it's a drop, and then flat, flat, and then drop, drop. It's continuous all throughout. And one quick last thing that I just wanted to show you a little bit that maybe helps you understand or visualize with the injector pattern. If we look at the opening and the stay on open mode, so that's the high amperage used to open the injector, and this is the pulsing to hold it open. So that drop, basically that rate, is occurring when that injector is basically being controlled and pulsed to flow fuel. So that is cylinder number 1, and now we'll move up cylinder 3. Let's see, 4, and number 2. So again, there's that characteristic. This is the other faulty one, number 3. Number 4. And number 2. So again, you can tell the whole drop process or drop period is during the operation of open time for the injector, and that's where we are getting our incorrect basically flow rate, because all of them are having this same activity. They're being pulsed open, cycled periodically to stay open and spray, but our fuel drop characteristic and amount is different. So again, I'm just trying to reiterate that it's an incorrect flow type of pattern that is affecting our fuel basically physically in our combustion process. And just for sake of numbers, our starting, let's say, point up here, peak point, to the drop point, we're at 1800 down to 17.3, so it's about 114 psi drop that this known good injector has done. I don't know where the other ones are at, but I guess we can try to look at it. So there is our cylinder 4, which almost reached the same point, but it actually dropped more. Let's see where that guy went. So down to 140 psi. So that's even between the other cylinder that was supposedly good or not misfiring. That's a big drop difference. And now we'll go to cylinder 3, which is one of the bad ones. And wow, barely a drop difference. Let's see. 62.5 psi drop. Again, they are being controlled and cycled and pulsed. It's just the flow rate. It's not the same. Now we'll go number 1. And this one actually started a little bit higher. Let's see. And there. So 108. That's actually close to the 114 on the other one. But even though the way in the pattern, how it stayed flatlined, is just different. But pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see, to be able to measure. For those of you curious, I have scaled the fuel pressure sensor onto the Pico with a custom probe. That way I can get some numbers if I needed to, as far as an idea of our pressure readings. But yeah, I just thought I'd show that last tidbit. And again, this guy will need a set of injectors.